What's up, Foxton Fox here, and welcome back to Tech. Now, for the inaugural episode of Tech's Resurgence, I wanted to look at one of the most popular graphics cards of all time, one that is always talked about whenever talking about budget hardware, the legendary GTX 750 Ti. Now, there is no driver support for it anymore, but does that mean it's obsolete and belongs in the junk drawer, or are there other uses for it? I plan to find that out today. The graphics card that I have is an EVGA GTX 750 Ti superclocked. It has a base clock of 1176 MHz, a boost clock of 1255 MHz, 640 CUDA cores, and 2 GB of GDDR5. Now it is a cordless GPU, so you don't need an external 6-pin connector in order to connect it. And it recommends a 400 watt or greater power supply, which is quite a lot considering that it does not require external power. But nonetheless, it's one of the easiest cards to slot in. It's exactly like slotting in a cartridge on the Nintendo DS, which is why it's perfect for, say, a Dell pre-built or something along those lines that you want to slap it into. Now, my benchmark list isn't as modern as I'd like it to be. I want to get the Skywalker Saga Lego game, I want to get Elden Ring, and please suggest other games you want me to test in the comments down below. But I will be running through some modern titles and other not so modern titles, but all of which should be fairly intensive. I did not pick any esports titles. So the first game on the list is Days Gone. Now for the benchmarks, I recorded them twice. Once to get 1080p 30 FPS with the best visuals possible, and once to get low settings with 60 FPS and certain resolutions. So that was my goal, and I did that for whatever I felt needed it. Now Days Gone at 1080p with the low settings ran at 37 FPS, and this was a very intensive scene. There were a bunch of zombies all over the place in the horde mode. Now, I've never played this game before, so I didn't last very long, but I did end up completing this first challenge. And switching it down to 720p with low granted us 52 FPS. So not quite 60, but close enough to where I felt comfortable just leaving it at that, as taking down the render resolution would make the game look a little bit worse. And I figured most people would rather just have a 720p experience. So 52 FPS at 720p was fine. Now, can the 750 Ti run Crysis Remastered? It can. At 1080p with the medium settings, we saw an average of 44 FPS, so still quite good, although in some scenes you will see closer to 30 FPS on average. But in general, I'm surprised at how well the 750 Ti did Crysis Remastered, considering that it is Crysis, and granted it wasn't running at fantastical settings, but it was still beyond what I expected it to be. All I had to do to get Crysis Remastered to run at over 60 FPS was switch it down to 900p with the lowest possible settings, which I kind of regret doing because it wasn't necessary. I would definitely at least keep anti-aliasing on. We saw an average of 69 FPS, nice, at 900p with the lowest possible settings, so there definitely was wiggle room if you're just looking for a 60 FPS average. Though there were again scenes that ended up tanking this frame rate down to the 40s, but that's just Crysis Remastered. Now, another modern game that really surprised me, despite its controversial nature and mixed reviews, 2K22 at 1080p with high and 4x anti-aliasing averaged 34 FPS, but it did not feel good. I am not actually this bad at the game. The refresh rate being variable was an issue in this game, so I would definitely recommend, if you're going to go for these settings, capping it at 30 FPS instead of letting it just go and jump around from 31 to 48. Which it did quite a lot. There was a lot of variation considering it's all on the same basketball court, but that would still be easily taken care of with a frame rate cap. And of course, what's really nice about 2K22, a game that came out ironically in 2021, but still a very modern and fresh game, is that I could play it at 1080p with above 60 FPS. Okay, not quite above 60 FPS, more like 54 FPS on average, with 1080p low and 1x anti-aliasing. So still very good, and half the court ran at above 60 FPS and half the court didn't, which makes no sense to me. I cannot make it make sense. But the fact that I was able to get a very smooth 54 FPS average that felt much better than the 34 FPS average with this card at full HD 1080p was incredibly impressive to me. And it also represents games that would still be able to be played in 2022 even without the newest drivers. Unfortunately, it doesn't support DirectX 12, which makes games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla unachievable on the 750 Ti. But there are still plenty of games coming out that still have DX11 support and don't need the newest drivers to run. So that's why I don't think that it's just a junk drawer graphics card yet. Now, a slightly older game, but a game that I've been absolutely loving playing recently is Outer Worlds. On the medium settings at 1080p, Outer Worlds averaged 31 FPS. So quite an impressive feat, though running into towns like Edgewater did tank that frame rate, so you might want to push it down to low. And for a Nintendo Switch-like experience of 720p low, but with 59 FPS, which the Switch definitely could not do, Outer Worlds ran incredibly well. And because of the art style, I don't think that 720p is that big of a detractor, although that could just be the fact that I've been playing Outer Worlds on my Switch most of the time. It is a great game. If you haven't played it, it's on Game Pass, or it's $20 on the Switch. I would definitely recommend it. And last, but maybe least in some people's eyes, Fortnite at 1080p with the medium settings saw an average of 51 FPS. Now, this was a benchmark that I probably should have taken another shot at, but I didn't because I was lazy and tried to really nail down a 60 FPS average, because at first it was a 60 FPS average, which is why I was like, maybe we can just skip doing 2 benchmarks for this game like we did in a few others. Because at 1080p with the medium settings, we did see an average of 51 FPS, but in some parts that average was 42, and in others the average was 64. So it all depends on where you are on the map, and I think that 1080p low would be a much better option if you want to stick to 1080p, or turning on performance mode, which is what I do even on my RTX 3080, because Fortnite doesn't look good in the first place, and just getting as many frames as possible. Nonetheless, that was a GTX 750 Ti, and I'm very impressed at how this little card could still run. I wouldn't recommend picking one up for your main build unless you are very, very severely limited on budget. Even a GTX 950 would work better. But I think for a secondary or tertiary PC, if you want to slap a 750 Ti with a 6100, then I think that that's perfectly fine. If you just want to throw it in a Dell, get one of the ones that don't require any external power, and you'll be good to go. And that is, I think, still a great use case for the 750 Ti. I think that it makes a fantastic secondary or tertiary PC to put in your lineup. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I do have a few updates for people who are interested, but I understand that you're also here for tech, so that was the tech portion of the video. Now, I want to talk about what's been going on, because obviously Tech is back on the main channel that has over 1,000 subscribers, and that's because I've been continually losing the subscribers on this channel as I switch to gaming. So people want to see Tech, and a lot of my spark has been reinvigorated for doing tech videos, so I have no issues doing it. I will still continue to try to do daily uploads on my second channel, Fox, and see if I can build a community around games there. So if you want to be a part of that community, please consider checking out Fox. Otherwise, this video is going to be the first of many about tech on this channel. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'm excited to see where this goes in the future. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do what you're usually doing. As always, buy yourself something nice.